Hello Faggers, trash can compilation coming at you gays for another cancer compilation. Thanks for subscribing and liking my videos Faggers.
If it's not a him and if it's not a her, what is it? Dr. Jordan Peterson is a professor at the University of Toronto and joins me now because there's been this debate that's been simmering around there, and you're at the center of it, about politically correctness. And some people are saying, well, we don't need to be referred to by that certain pronoun, him or her. But what's the solution?
Well, the solution at the moment is mandated use of whatever pronoun someone demands to be referred to by. Now, I think when the...
Can they suggest anything?
As far as I can tell, they can, and I'm not trying to be alarmist about this, but what's happened since the legislation was introduced is that there's been an explosion in gender identity categories. And so, for example, in New York now, there are 31 protected gender identity categories. And as far as I can tell, there's nothing in the legislation that stops there from being a requirement for people to use a different pronoun for every single one of those categories.
So as a professor, and you get a class at the start of the year, does someone have to have a sign on them to say which one they are, what they prefer? The
practicalities of this are obviously one of the impediments to, one of the reasons for the legislation being improperly formulated, in my opinion. I mean, I believe that when people were first considering drafting this, they thought maybe there would be 2.1 genders, something like that, you know, so there'd be he, she, and some alternative term which we haven't settled on.
It's sort of like years ago when it was Mrs., Miss, and people said then, well, we want Ms., but there's only one Ms.
Yes.
So there's 3 categories. What you're telling us now is that there could be 40, there could be more.
Well, there's 58 on Facebook. And
so what is the administration of the university saying to you when you say, well, this just is unworkable?
Well, they sent me 2 letters, one of which was a warning and one which was a more serious warning, stating that the fact that I was having this discussion was probably illegal under the Ontario Human Rights Code, which is exactly what I made the video about, because I thought it probably was illegal. So I do believe that under current Ontario law, perhaps even the discussion that we're having right now is illegal. And you know, you might think that they aren't
running in here to arrest us right now. Well, we're fine for now.
Yes, we're fine for now. But the university took that seriously enough to warn me. And but I also should say that on Friday I went and talked to the dean because they asked me to stop talking about it. And I went and talked to the dean and I suggested that we deal with this like civilized human beings and have a debate that the university would host on the issue, and they have agreed to do that.
So they're going to have a public debate. Students and other people can attend and say, okay, what's the solution?
Well, I don't know if the public will be invited to attend, but we're going to have it broadcast on YouTube, live cast on YouTube. I think it's going to be restricted to the university community, but we are going to have a debate about it.
So it's not really just you then and the university. What is happening is that the university is saying we have provincial law here now, which is dictating certain actions on our behalf.
Well, I think that they're very concerned about that, yes. They actually thanked me today, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science, David Cameron, actually thanked me for bringing this to the attention of the university community.
Yeah, he's not a stupid man.
No, he's not, by no means.
And so, I mean, he's sensitive to it, though, but they're saying the provincial law, when was this law changed in the province?
Well, I don't know when
approximately.
It's within the last few years, but Bill C-16 is the same law at the federal level, and it just passed second reading. And so this is law in 5 provinces already and is about to become national law. And I also should point out that it makes discussion around pronoun use and around gender identity subject to the provisions of the hate speech. It's not merely, yes, it's not good. It's not good.
It sounds like Fahrenheit 451
yes,
or something.
Yes, it does.
I'm out of time, but I have a feeling that you and I are going to be chatting again because this is an ongoing problem. I look forward to that. Thanks, Professor.
All right.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there's 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war? The jihadist ideology that you talk about, it's an ideology. How can you ever win this thing if you don't address it ideologically?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, save the applause till the end. Thank you. Thank you. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? You're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible. It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling it.
Well, joining me now to discuss this and the wider implications are the columnist and broadcaster Milo Yiannopoulos and the journalist Rennie Edo-Lodge. They're in our central London studios for us this evening. Very good evening to you both. Rennie, how do you feel about being called different because you're hardwired differently? I'm sure it's not something you've failed to hear before. It just seems to keep cropping up. Is it necessary?
It's ridiculous. It's 50s thinking, you know. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, this biological determinism. Frankly, you know, interests and talent and, you know, passions for particular topics, subjects, sports, arts, whatever, like, they're not relegated to either gender, but unfortunately, because of some stereotypical thinking, often one gender is encouraged to pursue, you know, a sport or an art more so than the other. And actually, when you look at my colleague at the Telegraph, Radhika Sagani, she wrote a piece just this morning speaking to like young girls who play chess, and actually what she found out is that they're dropping out at the age of 12, probably because, you know, they're not encouraged, or, you know, there's an environment around that's telling them that it's not for them, it's not cool, etc., etc. So, you know, this hardwired brain stuff, like it's retrosexism.
So, Milo Yiannopoulos, does it matter if men and women are wired differently, have different skills?
No, it doesn't matter in the sense that they are equal but different, but it simply isn't true to say that there is no difference whatsoever between the aptitudes of men and women. And it is, without question, true that there are some biological differences between men and women, and we know that from our anatomy. But we also know it from experiments that we do on young children before they've had the opportunity to be socialized, the sorts of toys that they go for. And that holds true actually for other bits of the animal kingdom as well. Some of the reason why girls drop out of STEM subjects at college and chess clubs is because they keep losing. And one of the reasons they keep losing is that it does seem to be the case that chess as a game plays to some of the male intellectual virtues. And when Simon Baron-Cohen talks about these, the way he describes it is men are good at systematizing and women are good at empathizing. And there is some reason to suppose that that may have some basis in biology. It's very trendy these days to say that everything is socially determined, but that's not what the science says. And it's not either what common sense says, because if it were true, these days there would be a lot more representation of women in the sciences, in astrophysics, in philosophy, in mathematics, and in chess, but there isn't.
So, Rennie, does that make sense? And does it really matter? I mean, should we just accept that we are slightly different, have different skills, pursue them, or should we all be striving to be as good as each other at everything?
It seems really reductive, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look around at your, you know, male and female friends and families, you'll see a vast, like a huge wide variety and diversity in interests and talents and passions, right? And also I think that it's ridiculous to assume that the reason why one gender is overrepresented in a field is because the other gender is not quite up to it. I mean, often, you know, if a field is homogenous, right, which, as we can see, chess is homogenous, that also brings with it a culture that makes things unwelcoming for people who do not quite fit the bill. Like it's almost victim blaming in a way to suggest that the reason why there's an overrepresentation of a particular kind of person is because the other kind of person just isn't quite up to it. Like, it's ridiculous. If that was the case, we don't live in a meritocracy. So
it's nice to have these sort of vague, waffly, sort of everyone has varied interests. What the science suggests is that, for example, when it comes to IQ is distributed differently between the sexes. Now, IQ gets a really bad rap because it's not a great indicator of some things. It's said to be sexist, it's said to be biased towards white people, whatever. The point is that it tests, in this case, it tests all of the skills that make you good at chess really well. It's about puzzles, it's about games, exactly the skills that make you good at chess, make you good at IQ. Now, the way that IQ is distributed differently in the sexes is that women tend to cluster around the mean. Women are more likely to have an IQ that is somewhere near the average, whereas men go right to the top or right to the bottom more often, which is why you get great genius male artists and philosophers, but it's also why men fill all the prisons, because men seem to occupy more of the ends of the IQ scale. And now IQ is pretty much the best measure we have to predict whether somebody will be good at chess.
And what it proves, and what it also proves, that men and women can talk forever. It's been a pleasure talking to you both. We're going to leave it there. Thank goodness we're all different.
Yes, indeed.